instituted segment of talk and sharing about community concerns that emanate from the Canaan Baptist Church of Christ right here in the village of Harlem. We call it Crosstalk, and it's an opportunity for the pastor to sit with various persons within our congregation, but also those who are serving this community and this congregation to sit down and just try to talk about and iron out and inform you, the community, of some insights as related to things that you care about and things that we care about as a congregation. So welcome back. I'm Thomas Johnson. I'll be your host today. I also serve as senior pastor of the Canaan Baptist Church, and we have this distinguished group of community servants and disciples of Canaan Baptist Church with us, some of whom are here for their second visit. And this is a follow-up from 2 weeks ago before we held the national election. They are back, and I'm really excited to hear some of the things they're going to say post-election. But I also want to welcome back our Democratic District Leader, William Allen. He was with us 2 weeks ago, and we're very grateful to have him with us. And also, we're so delighted to have with us Ms. Shauna Herman-Goff, who is one of the executives with the senator of our community, of our district. Help me out. Senator Brian Benjamin. Senator Brian Benjamin. And she's been doing a lot of work, not only in that campaign, but we see her around Harlem all the time in community service as well. And then my good friend is here from one of the most powerful labor unions in the country. Had a chance to meet with him and chat with him a number of times. We found out he was in the neighborhood, and so we asked him to come over. And one of his members, Brother Johnny Davis, Johnny Patterson, who is one of our deacons in training. I'm going to give you the privilege of introducing him as one of our panel members today.
So Kyle Bragg is our president of SEIU, Local 32BJ, which is 185,000 members strong in, I believe, 12 states now, from New Hampshire all the way down to Florida. And he's my boss, he's my brother. He is a strong leader, he leads with passion, and I'm privileged to work side by side with him.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Johnny. And then we have our regulars back. We have our deacon, one of the longtime deacons of Canaan Baptist Church, not in age, but in service. He's served as chairman of our official board for a long period of time, Deacon Michael Russell. You just raise your hand so the folks can see you. Our doctor of everything, it seems, Dr. Roger Harris, who not too long ago completed his doctor in ministry degree from New York Theological Seminary, but he also holds the position of director for evangelism. And in recent weeks, because of the measure of mental health issues, depression, anxiety, and otherwise, he is certified. He is a CPE, as we call them, and we call on him often to assist us in providing services to people who are struggling in the midst of this virus and some other issues. Sandra Jeffries is back with us. Sandra is part of our deaf ministry, but she is also a tremendous help in so many other things that we do, and she has a very good perspective on a lot of the issues that we talk about. On top there is the one that I affectionately call Hurricane. Her name is Katrina. I named her for the hurricane down in New Orleans some years ago. Katrina Barnes. She is the vice chairman of our trustee ministry here at Canaan, and we're delighted to see her. Up top is Dr. Robert Thompson, who is director or pastor for community services and ecumenical affairs, and we depend on him a great deal for what we try to do around Canaan. So we're happy to have him as part of this panel. And of course, you've heard Johnny Patterson, one of our deacons in training. He is very civic-minded, and he participated, as long as I've known him, in ground zero kinds of community activism. So we're delighted to have Johnny with us. And then Brother Mark Flowers, seated toward the back. Mark is also one of our deacons in training. He's been a member or disciple here at Canaan for many years, but he's very insightful, and he has extensive work with community action agencies or human service delivery, has much to say about the challenges that people are facing in these challenging times. So thank you to the panel for being here, and thank you to the audience who thought it not robbery to tune in. I hope that you were blessed by our service earlier this morning or this afternoon. We are back with this second episode of Canaan Crosstalk. Now, this particular episode deals with the post-election response of this country, and I am anxious to hear what these very qualified panelists have to say with regard to a post-election and what it means for our country, what does it mean for our community, and what is it that you hope to see and can expect to see, or will hold new leadership in government, what will you hold them responsible for doing in terms of the changes that are needed? So let me start off this first segment, which is basically a recap of last Tuesday that lasted until Saturday, where any of you like me getting a little anxious, feeling a little anxiety about the time it was taking to to tally the votes, and I realized after a while that it was a very new way with the mail-in ballots that was going to extend it. That perhaps may be our new normal. I don't know, but we do know that it was a very, very different way to find out who your president-elect was. But that's not to discount what we had experienced as a country, as citizens for 4 years. I don't want to talk too much about the difficulty in tallying the vote as much as I want to talk about recapping what life has been like for the last 4 years. We've had a political year that, more than anything else, was shaped by this horrifying COVID-19 epidemic. That goes without saying, and the effects of that are just so far beyond anything that we could have imagined. But then when you tether that to the kind of administration that we had in place, responsible for not only monitoring the good health of the people, the citizenry, but of military, of foreign relations, and many other the local issues that we send our people to Washington to champion for us. We engaged in this national response, or protest actually, aggressive protest against or for social justice and against racial injustice. Now, try to imagine, as you're formulating your thoughts, a pandemic and social outrage over racial injustice. They're all intertwined at the same time. And then there's the police brutality. There are these names that have been etched now into our history, like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the list is getting so long, I can't even remember I'm gonna have to write down all the names of the people. I used to call off the roll, but the roll is so long now, I can't do that. There's the partisan division that one would have thought we could have and should have found a way to come together when so many people on the red and the blue side are dying. And rather than finding that common ground, sometimes I think our political posture took top billing over the health of a people. I may be wrong about that. I know that we're racially divided. I know that we were divided by, as a country, because whether you like it or not, the loser, if you will, the person that didn't win this election, did have 70 million votes. 70 million votes. Now what does that mean? I want to find out from one of y'all. What does that mean that the person who was not elected was able to garner 70 million Americans to cast their lot? And then the integrity of the electoral process is being questioned. I don't know if we want to spend much time on that. I don't see that there's much there, but if time permits, we can talk about that. But also the fact that this candidate that did win, Joseph Biden, president-elect, flipped five states that Trump had won in 2016. Michigan being one. I was watching most of these schools' football teams yesterday. Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Georgia even. Georgia. So the dynamics of the 2020 election are prime territory for historians and psychologists. The psychology of this nation. Where are we now as compared to where we might have been 2016? So the question is, what did these election results say or mean to you? And I don't know, I think we're on track. Let me just go, just generally speaking, and if you kind of make it brief, we'll just go around. If you had one or two words to describe what this last election meant to you, what do you say, Dee?
Hope. Hope for the future. You know, hope for humanity. Very important with that, because over the last 4 years, we've seen division, divisiveness, racial, Charlottesville, etc. Now we're seeing a sense of hope through humanity with people in terms of the decisions going forward.
Yeah, I felt hope too, but I just hope that it wasn't misplaced. I still feel hope. I still, for the first time, and I don't know how long, Dr. Harris, I heard people say, boy, I had a good day today. Something as simple as that. I feel good today. Today was a nice day. What do you think?
I think my words is that we have hope for a continuity of democracy. That's what I was afraid of more than anything else. Another 4 years of the previous administration, I think, would have ended democracy.
Okay. Trina?
I definitely said strength. Our voters came out to the polls, our young people came out to the polls, and I think that's what was needed. Definitely
Yeah.
strength.
Yeah. I'm going to want to ask probably later on, yes, those numbers were, and they came out in the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
that caveat has to go there too, but that 70 million in the on the other side is just, I'm curious about that. I won't be able to get everybody on this first round, but Dr. Thompson, what comes to mind when you think about this particular election?
What comes to mind is the word powerful, because Americans, particularly African Americans, during this election felt it not robbery to come out and speak on their voice. And I think it's powerful because it shows that we can make a change. We flipped Georgia because African Americans came out, so that's why my word would be powerful.
All right. Well, let me sort of transition and I'll get into some of our guests. Your thoughts about that. You are obviously you're public officials. You, in many ways, public officials, and I know your organization works on the ground towards educating people about the very thing that he just said. But that being said, black voters, even the president-elect is saying this. He said it. He put it out there. The African-American community had my back, and I owe you. I think he put that addendum on it. I owe you. Now, we've heard this before. We heard it. I've heard it before. I heard it from, well, I've heard it from, just about everyone makes some kind of promise of how the African-American community is going to be better off because you're president. I think this one is exceptional. But that being the case, and I'll start, Shauna, with you, his win, obviously, and he said it, was due to the overwhelming support from African Americans. That's true, that's a fact. We've documented that. But what should we expect as a result of that? Do we just want to have an even playing field, or is there some ground that needs to be made up, as in some type of reparation for past failures, something that may go back to slavery? I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think black people in general had a hard time with government in itself because we had issues that we wanted to be pushed to our local elected leaders, national elected leaders, and a lot of those issues weren't being pushed. And so when President Trump won in 2016, people wanted something that wasn't so political. They wanted something different. And as we've seen these past 4 years, it kind of deviated to something that we didn't anticipate or expected. And so people were coming out, African Americans were coming out in numbers now because they wanted, especially young people, and I have a 19-year-old son, they wanted their progressive ideas to be brought to life. And we saw that with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, their progressive ideas, and just the mere fact that the country is ready for a woman, and a woman of many colors. She's African American. She's a woman of the South Asian descent. So it shows that we are ready for progressive change. And now the young people want to see, yes, we have a new vice president-elect and a president-elect, but we want to see our issues that we bring forth actually shown and being not just speakers, but doers. Because we have a lot of elected officials that will say, this is what they want to do and this is what they'll do, but who is actually getting it done? And so the younger generation wants to see these elected officials actually taking action on their progressive issues.
Okay. Thank you. If I could just shift that to your neighbor, obviously your organization is about economic empowerment for your members and on behalf of your members. We know that the statistics for the last 4 years, regardless of what the current administration says, what we see on the ground in our communities isn't consistent with Wall Street numbers and job growth numbers. If you had an audience with the president-elect right now, what would you say to him on the issue of economic empowerment in the black community? What is it that we don't have right now that we need, and how do we go about it?
Thank you. First of all, Dr. Johnson, thank you for always using this platform to help have these type of discussions for our community, and thank you for inviting me here. This election in itself has, just like this pandemic, has pulled back the curtain for America and has shown the incredible disparities that exist in communities of color, black and brown communities, and that we knew existed all the time, but yet America has been in denial over. And when we, just falling back a second to the word, I think about work. And I think about work because there's much work has been put into this election. There's much more work that has to be done in order to secure the promise of this election, that we get past the division, that we get past the inequities and the biases that exist in this country that hold working people and people of color back, that we break down the structural and systemic racism that has held us back and that has shown all the many disparities that this 4 years with this president has revealed and this pandemic has revealed. The inequities in our healthcare system, the inequities in our education system, the inequities in employment and housing. And what we as a union see our responsibility is, one, going into this election, educating the electorate, making sure they understand that they have to vote their interests, that not their party, but their interests. And what we understood in the last 4 years is that the labor unions that have created some equity for people of color around this country, has put them into the middle class, has been under the attack. And they want to destroy labor unions and take power away from the labor unions, and that is taking power away from workers. Not taking power away from institutions, it's taking power away from workers. And want to roll back the hands of time, and that's what this slogan, Make America Great Again, it was never great for people who look like me. It was never great for people who toil every day to try to make a way in this country. And we want to make it great once and equitable for everyone at some point. And so we want to not live the mistakes of our past either. We elected leaders. We did not elect a messiah. I mean, we thought about that in 2008 when Obama was elected. We have to hold their feet to the fire. We have more work ahead of us than we did pre-election, because we have to make sure that they hold true to the commitment and the promise to the people who got them elected. 90% of people of color are responsible for this victory.
Yes.
Black people, brown people, got this president, this ticket, Biden-Harris, elected. And they owe it. We don't want to hear that they owe us, that we want to see it in action. And my mind is still on Georgia.
Okay.
Because we have to get down there and make sure that this president has the power when he takes office to create the type of change that this country really is thirsty for and needs. So although he got the loser in this contest got 70 million votes, which also pulls back the curtain about all the problems that this country still struggles with racism and bias. You have educated people, educated white women who voted for a misogynist, a sexist, because they thought that their interests were lied in his victory. And that's scary in itself. And there's going to be a lot of analysis, as you said, Dr. Johnson, of the outcome and the consequences of this election. But for me as a labor leader and for my membership, we're going to be on the ground, constantly holding their feet to the fire, to the commitment that they made to this country to chart a new direction and to make sure that we destroy the walls and the barriers that created by structural and systemic racism, and that we give equal opportunity to everyone in this country. And so,
Well, thank you. I mean, these points are leading to other points. Let me get Mark. I see you warming up in the bullpen, but let me get to Mark. Mark, you have an analytical mind. And for the last 4 years, whether it had to do with the assassination of a black man in the streets of one of our cities, or the disparity in contracting COVID virus between people of color and those who weren't, there's always this response, we have to have that conversation. But Mark, I don't know what that means. When you have that conversation, what are the bullets? What are the bullet points? And what kind of resolution? I know this is a lot to ask in one setting, but could you kind of give us the framework for how you have that kind of conversation?
Well, you have to start off with being honest with ourselves. And when the brother was talking about keeping, feet to the fire, the population, for the most part, we said this in the last episode, that, the election isn't the end of politics. You have to come out. You have to go visit with Brother Benjamin, and listen to what his platform is. Tell him what you need, and we have to support them and give so that they have the backing. Because there's, again, all eyes are still on Georgia. We are celebrating Biden's win. But just like when President Obama was in office, if he doesn't have control of Congress,
Yeah.
what's the point?
Well, that is a point that needs to be made, that if you don't have the other bodies in our legislative process, our governmental process in place, particularly the House and the Senate, it's what is it? You're just treading whatever, only what you can do by executive order, which Trump used all the time, which really doesn't carry a lot of weight, and it will probably end up in court. But I see. I may want to come back to you on this. But Brother Jackson, you mentioned something our last episode about when one of the black men of New York was assassinated by the police. You were able to determine that no one attended the community board meeting. Could you take us revisit that? Hold your mic up a little bit.
We were talking about Amadou Diallo. So he was murdered after more than 40 bullets came his way in the doorway of his building. He was an African immigrant. And the tragedy was not so much, it was another example of police brutality or ignorance. It was more centered in terms of what was our responsibility. And so when we're not involved, engaged in our own communities, these kind of horrendous activities take place. And so every precinct has a community council. And so if we're not engaged in that process, then we're just as guilty of the outcomes that take place.
So engagement seems to be one of those words you would put up in your PowerPoint presentation. Engagement, and what does that? Because I think that we have been disengaged for so long, the church included, that we need to sharpen our engagement tools. We know how to do it, and we're not afraid to do it, but we just we've lost sight of that part of moving forward an agenda on behalf of your people. Let me, Deke, I'm gonna get to you, but I wanna ask Sandra Jeffries a question about the crime bill of 1994, which came up a great deal during the election because Joe Biden was a member of the U.S. Senate when that bill was passed. Bill Clinton, who was sometimes called the first black president of the United States, was the champion of the crime bill, which was a response to even the Congressional Black Caucus to do something about crime in this country. And that's where the three strikes thing came up. I remember having a conversation with the district attorney in my community who was very afraid for some of the young men in our community because they had had 2 previous low-grade felony arrests, possession of a joint, or walking around with an open can of beer. Well, that's 2. One more than long-term incarceration. Thus, the emergence of this industrial, what do we call that? These private prisons. Yeah. And people just entrepreneurs made buku money off all right. And what I thought about when the last election, when Bill was campaigning for Hillary in Philadelphia, those people at the rally were booing him down and I said, why, how dare they boo the first black president of the United States? Like that, Bill Clinton and the black people, they were booing him because it was their fathers who were the first inmates of those private prisons as a result of that crime bill. So it is a tender spot among younger Americans. I remember times when I was an elected official, I said, federal government needs to help us with all this crime, these gangs and all that stuff. This was what they offered. But the result, once again, was this disparity. That being said, Sandra, that crime bill, despite the fact that the black voters overly supported, and we tend to do that, don't we? I mean, even if we don't get anything much out of the previous administration, we always come back. And we came back in a big way this time, supporting the Democratic ticket, mostly up and down the ballot. Trump received a surprising increase of black male voters, Sandra. How could he even get one? But 14%, I think, is the last number I saw. How does that happen?
Thank you, Pastor, for inviting me back. And it's really a great conversation and a very needed one. I think now to your question about how did he get one black voter?
Yeah, why would a black man have voted for Trump?
I think several reasons. As one of our participants says, that it's how black people don't necessarily see things the way the greater society does, and sometimes we have a lot of distrust for our government. So, and distrust and disillusionment can come from all sides to the point that you don't trust anyone. I talk to my grandchildren, they say, well, I don't really trust anyone in the government. So, and that's one issue. And I think Trump, our soon-to-be former president, I think he tapped into something where it was, he promoted an anti-establishment persona. And it gave, and a lot of people who feel frustrated, who feel that they're not being heard, they can at least feel that they can give out all that energy, that anger that they have, and someone is giving them the platform to do it. And that anger, that nastiness, this is how they feel. This is what they want to project into the world. But I think that that's why he got those voters. But I have to say that he got 70 million, but Joe Biden got 78 million. And that demonstrates the power of our vote. Yeah. And I think that we realize this election demonstrated without a shadow of a doubt the power of our votes.
Well, I hope that has been transmitted into the minds of younger voters who may have had some disillusion about whether or not their vote counts, because he would not have won without it. Mike, I want to ask you a question. I'm going to let you say what you wanted to say, but the question is, there are some people, and I've heard it mentioned in the talk shows on the news programs, that there are still black men in the country, voices, not just guys hanging out in the pool room, but voices that are part of organizations who still are angry with President Biden about his vote on the crime bill. He said that was a mistake. He came out and said the crime bill was a mistake. But do we still want to hold him accountable in any way for that decision? He was a senator then. I don't want to put too much weight on it.
It's a two-part, because of the fact that Kamala was the attorney in California. She also prosecuted quite a few of black and brown people. And a lot of folks was talking about that. A lot of young people were speaking about that component. And I had to explain to them that you had to live in that era for them to make that decision. And unfortunately, we went through the crack epidemic, where families were segregated because of the drug and because of the working class. And therefore, you had issues where something was needed at the time to kind of control the environment that we were living in Bushwick and Compton.
I guess you almost want to say, we need something, anything.
Right. And unfortunately, it might have been a bad decision now, looking back.
But like I said, their dads and uncles and what have you were the
I remember that era pretty well, the crack era, and I got to tell you, that era killed community engagement. Because during that time, I remember my mom and her friends who were very active in the community going to They no longer wanted to leave their home because they thought it was going to be broken into. They did not want to walk their streets anymore because they thought they were going to be robbed or harmed. And so it was a very difficult time, and Biden was not the only one voting for that bill.
True.
Carolyn Mosley Braun, black woman from
Chicago.
Illinois, who was also in the Senate, voted for that bill, and all the members of the Congressional Black Caucus. And so we have to be able to properly explain history to people before they take things out of context and make an assumption that, here, Mike died on me, take things out of context. So we got to make sure that we continue to educate ourselves on how certain decisions happen in a certain time. You know, I was watching this series recently about John Brown on cable TV, you know, and I learned a lot, you know, especially the character Onion. But you know, right now this election proved something. I think it proved that we are more sophisticated. You know, the fact that young black folks still came out and voted for Biden, they're now able to understand what took place. Because Trump people are the ones who pushed this notion that Biden's not with you. I see that party and him and their group, they tied into the social media and they were convincing young people that Biden and Kamala was on their side. In fact, they even used artists in the hip hop community, some of them who they tried to pay off. And one young man went on public with it, saying, listen to all these text messages, they're trying to pay me to take a certain position. They used Kanye West, they used the brother out in California, Ice Cube. I mean, it was like getting ridiculous, but I'm so proud that our young people did not fall for it. And I just, you know, I think Stacey Abrams is one of the reasons why they did not fall for it. We had a vehicle in place that was really out grassroots, that was really out there educating people, particularly the Divine Nine, the work that they did, and our unions. This time we wasn't gonna fall for the okie doke, because in 2016, Hillary lost because they put out all that stuff on her and her husband.
Right.
And she lost. I mean, like, black folk was not voting. And so this time around we said, no, we just cannot have that man coming back.
Okay, man not coming back, how much of that is for the reasons you just cited, but if there had not been a COVID, could we have still expected the same response?
Yes.
Okay.
I think people, when it comes to Donald Trump, I mean, the element in our society that he has kicked up out of the dust and the mud, it's been so horrendous. I mean, the language, and so I'm the national director of National Action Network, Reverend Sharpton, so I get to see the ugly side of America because I get all his hate mail.
Yeah.
I get the emails, the death threat. I mean, I see all this stuff, and I got to tell you guys, the stuff I've been able to see it leaves you really in a lot of tears.
I can imagine.
You know, and so I think that COVID was great in the sense that it really brought a lot of folks out in terms of the protests and bringing young people to the street and getting them more politically active. It was certainly a barometer and a catalyst for that. But I still believe that we would have came out for this election because it was that bad.
Johnny, as I said, you're a ground zero man. The crime bill of 1994, and this will be maybe the last question on this topic, but in addition to incarceration, there was also the community policing was a component of that. And on face, it sounded pretty neat, you know, be neighborly with your local street cop, you know, like the old days, those old black and white movies where you even knew him. But statistics said that in itself was a monster in terms of increasing the numbers of black men being incarcerated. But on the ground, what is your thinking about community policing, just creating a greater presence of law enforcement in your neighborhood? How do you feel about that now going forward? By the way, before you answer that, I just happened to run across, you know, you wake up in the morning and your phone already has some news stuff before you even open up the screen, and there was a little piece on Harlem where these people, neighbors, community people, residents, were raising sand about the number of addiction organizations or agencies or clinics being placed in Harlem disproportionate to other parts of the city. Now, you know, I feel like I have a responsibility to look into that as a member of the community of faith. But it is a dual question. We want people with substance issues to have services available to them. But to what extent should any particular village or borough have to carry that? And it's sort of a sensitive kind of question, but Johnny, I'll let you take a shot at it.
So, I mean, there has to be more community partners involved in that. There has to be a lot more opportunity for people in the community to help shape the policies that are going to affect their community. I'm not sure to what extent that exists right now. I'm sure you have the district leader and all that, but I mean like from the grassroots. We have to sort of push. We're too reactionary, I think. We act out of crisis. And when there's no crisis, where's the activism? You know, is there still the same level of activism going on throughout the course of the year without reacting to like a police shooting? I think in order for us to get to where we're trying to go in terms of having fair representation, we got to continue to organize all the time, not just in crisis. They need to know that we have the troops to help push our agenda forward.
Johnny, let me interrupt you just to ask the follow-up question. Then I'm going to come back over to Shauna. We have to organize. Mm-hmm. Who is the we?
Well, us, the people that live in the community, but there's also community partners. I'm talking about the young, right? We just proved that the youth are interested. Half the time we discard with what they have to say, and we haven't figured out how to keep them involved in the things that go on in the community. We have to be creative in how we do that, right? I think NAN has a very good branch of their organization, the Youth Huddle, yes, that actually invites people in and have a voice in the community. We have to create more opportunities for our young to do that. And I just think that that's what needs to be done in terms of shaping policy in our community.
Well, I hope we can revisit that, because I think that's a action step that this is the time it has to be taken, not after Christmas. I mean, the conversation does have to begin about that. Now, Shauna, what I want to ask
And
you.
I just wanted to piggyback before you ask me the next question of what the gentleman back there said. Senator Benjamin actually started a community policing task force to where that basically is we have community leaders on this community policing task force. Instead of the police that's going out to the community saying, wear your mask, make sure you socially distance, and do other things, because a lot of times we are seeing that the NYPD, that they're actually doing things that other people can do, the community people can do, because I don't understand why you have the NYPD handling mental health issues out on the street in the community, or you enforcing people wearing masks, because a lot of times young men on the street who, if you see a police officer, automatically you're going to get defensive, especially we see police officers coming into neighborhoods and trying to enforce the mask and socially distance, and then it escalating to something else, and maybe someone gets shot. So I do love the fact that Senator Benjamin started the Community Policing Task Force, getting organizations to go out there in the community, telling people to social distance, telling people to wear their masks, talking to the mental health people, just instead of the police doing it.
Yeah,
Can I get on this?
Sure.
Doctor?
We are a little time sensitive, but go ahead, and I've got a lot of material to cover here.
I mean, this is a great discussion. I think, too, that our community has to stop playing three-card Monte with government, because what they're doing is having us look here while they're getting us over here. We can't margin, I mean, it's been brought up over and over again that there's a distrust in government from communities of color, from black communities. And it's actually right. And I had a young man tell me, why do we always have to act like crabs in a barrel and pull each other down? And I said, well, think about it, brother. The barrel is not a crab's natural environment. So that they're going to do what they do. Take the crab out of that environment and see how they respond. They put us in this barrel that is girded by structural and systemic racism, and then they want to know why we act the way we do. If you think back to the 60s, when the revolution was happening, they flooded our drugs, they flooded our community with heroin. And now they flood our communities with crack to quell the revolution. We have to get beyond what government can do for us. We have to make them do and be responsible and answerable to our communities, and we have to get past feeling sorry for ourselves. That they use that messaging with Biden to the T about the crime bill. Right. Yes, they flood our communities with drugs, but then they create the bills to lock us up with it. Yeah. Right? And so, it's all it's the illusion, having us look over here while they giving it to us over here. And so I think that it's a lot of work that we have to do to build confidence that we can be vehicles of change if we're together and we're talking about the real issues that impact our communities.
Next time we meet, we really, without the cameras and all, I just feel very passionately about this. With all this valuable, the resources on this platform, I just feel this strong need for us to have a think tank kind of congregate to actually come up with our own strategic, not something that is sent down to us, but a strategic plan that we send up to those who have the resources of how we want to transform our communities. Now, I don't have time to go into that right now because I got to ask Shauna this question. Now, Joe Biden was not showing a thing. And the reason I'm asking you is because you're a Gamecock. Until he went to South Carolina. And I can still hear Clyburn's voice. I still hear him. And with tears in his eyes. And as he talked about his late wife, and as he talked about a friendship that had been there for years and years and years, and says, we need Joe Biden, which seems to have turned the tide. I don't know if it was just because they got out of the South, out of the Midwest and across into the Northeast and finally got down south, or was that something else going? Was it another dynamic at work? Could you take a shot at that?
Jim Clyburn, a lot of people love him in the South and just all over. And the friendship that him and Joe Biden has is phenomenal. And when you have someone who's been in politics all his life, both Joe Biden and Jim Clyburn, and then he's endorsing him saying, this is who the South needs, this is who we need in America, of course American people, especially Black Americans, are gonna jump on board and say, this is who we need as well. When you have a lot of politicals, because a lot of times you don't see a lot of African American political leaders, but when you do hear them and when they're saying this is who we endorse, you kind of want to stand behind them and say, okay, we'll stand behind Joe Biden.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that seems to have been, I've always watched South Carolina in presidential elections. You know, when Jesse Jackson went down there and won, won the primary. And I think Rev did well. I know he did well in South Carolina. But I couldn't figure out how you could produce those kinds of numbers for Black candidates. Of course, Barack did well as well. But then give us a Lindsey Graham and what was the old man's name? Strom Thurmond. The politics in South Carolina is interesting.
Yeah.
It's a good study. It's a good study. Katrina, Katrina, Sandra, and Shauna. Kamala Harris. This is on the issue of black women and their vote. Black women voters and 72% of all women voters who live in urban areas voted for Biden, but 52% of white women and 58% of rural women went with Trump. Kamala Harris will make history when she is sworn in as vice president in January, but another black woman, Stacey Adams, is being hailed for the pivotal role that she played in helping the Biden-Harris ticket win the White House. In her acceptance speech, Kamala Harris honored the women who shattered the glass ceilings before her. She honored her mother. She honored all the black women whose presence in this election fundamentally changed democracy. Katrina, give me your take on Kamala Harris assuming this very high and important office of one heartbeat away from the Oval Office. How does that, is this a moment for you personally?
It's definitely a moment, I think, for black women, young and old, everywhere, to have someone who's going to the White House that looks like me. That in itself is just powerful. I know when we're in school and we're little and they say, dream big, this is really dreaming big, to actually see it happening in our lifetime, and especially as a young person, to be able to say, this is happening in my lifetime, and I can tell my kids about it. It's phenomenal. And women everywhere, I think, ought to be proud. Not just the fact that she's a woman, but a black woman.
Okay. Dr. Thompson, you've got 3 young black women in your house. What was actually you have 4, but the 3 younger ones. Yeah, how can you tell that this has inspired them, that Kamala has been elected vice president?
Yes, I honestly can say that it has inspired them. It has them looking beyond the normal jobs per se, or the achievements of what African American women can do. So I can rightly say, or say with confidence, that it has encouraged them to do more.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, Sandra, this is a very pointed question. All right, that's great to have been elected first black woman. You remember Kamala said, her mother or grandmother said, well, if you're the first, don't make sure you're not the last, which I think is powerful. Because if there's only one first forevermore, then that doesn't really speak well for progress. That being said, this is the vice presidency of the United States, very different, and Kamala would be familiar with this. She would be familiar with what it takes to run for an office, to debate, to have negative ads put out against you and all that. So I'm sure she's tough enough and has enough experience to assume that office. But I'm wondering, as we celebrate this first black woman to be vice president, are we at some point going to have to kind of tone the party part down? Not the political party, hey, to realize that she's going into what is a very critical part of the government operation. And I'm wondering, have we begun to do that? And if we haven't, what do we have to do as the people who are proud of her? But, there is still the work.
Great question. I'm happy to answer that. But I think that I'm really proud of Kamala Harris. It's so inspiring. But we are beginning, I think that now we are much more sophisticated than we were previously. And it's because of our black women and our black votes that Kamala Harris became the VP, the vice president. And I have so much admiration for a person like Stacey Abrams, because she is the one that's on the ground. And what she said the other day in one of her interviews was so powerful. She said, we have to make sure when we teach people how to vote. I'm paraphrasing her now, but one thing she did say, she said, it's she elected over 800, she helped get over 800,000 additional voters in Georgia, I believe. And what she said was so powerful. You have to make sure when you help them to vote, you register them to vote. That can be like giving someone a car and not teaching them how to drive. If you don't teach them what it means to be a voter, what it entails to be a voter. And that's what we talked about in our previous conversation, of the importance of going to school, having that class. And after our conversation, I asked several people. Many people have never had classes in civics. They don't know how important that is to be an American. Many blacks I have talked to, I don't know if they feel that they are really a part of America. So all of that, all of that makes a difference. That, you can say, is why the other side got over 70 million votes, because even though it was not to their favor, all of what's going against them, they felt American. They were invested in this country where they wanted their investment to be protected.
Okay, good response. I think we've got a clip from Kamala that we want to.
And about the generations of women, black women, Asian, white, Latina, Native American women, who throughout our nation's history have paved the way for this moment tonight. Women who fought and sacrificed so much for equality and liberty and justice for all, including the black women who are too often overlooked, but so often prove they are the backbone of our democracy.
Okay, that's deep, but that's rhetoric. And that's what the speechwriters are paid to do. Steve?
And I was telling you,
Oh, yeah, but but it is a very pointed statement about the direction of this country and where we are to go. So from just a citizen's point of view, citizen of the United States, and you have a vice president-elect who just happens to be a black woman, nothing associated with the fact she's black, but she's my vice president. I asked you about how do you feel about the outcome of the election. How do you feel about Kamala being vice president?
Well, personally, it takes me back to Shirley Chisholm.
Yeah.
My mother worked on her campaign back in the 70s. And because my mother was an activist in Brooklyn at the time, Major Owens and all those politicians they were having at the House, she knew the importance of not just having the first black woman, but having black women in power. We had IS-383, Loretta U. Boyce. These are some of the folks who became black women principals of educational systems in Brooklyn. So right now, we're reliving that same thing. Yes, Kamala's going to be, there are presidents of universities right now in Pennsylvania and Virginia that were just recently elected as presidents of their campuses, black women. So therefore, I think this is the age of the woman of color.
I think you're right.
The age of black women.
Yeah.
And they're going to, I really believe in.
And governors and state houses as well, governorships and all.
I like to just briefly give some credit.
Go ahead. No,
I was going to say, how Kamala Harris arrived to that role, and, not because I work for him, but he was the one who called for a woman of color to be vice president on the ticket. And so if we didn't ask for it, it probably would not have happened.
And so, so sometimes we miss bits and pieces of history, but it was really Al Sharpton that says that it has to be a woman on that ticket. And he pushed for it. And I got to witness it. And I saw it play out. And it happened. So to me, going back to claiming our power, we don't have to be shy. We got the numbers, so we got a Stacey Abrams. So Stacey Abrams knows the power of this hit, what they said, the solid majority. Well, our people are that solid majority, and when they are registered and they're educated on that vote, these are the kind of things that can take place.
And thank you for bringing that out. I mean, those are the little things that you can have a panel and someone could be in possession of a nugget of knowledge that kind of helps us all out. So thank you for bringing that out. You know, I suppose you are right. He said out front, I'm going to have a woman, but it was only until the latter part that the woman of color. I want to get Mark and Doc in real quick. They were both. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, as a member of the illustrious Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated,
Here we go.
to have, yes, like you said, she is a black woman. Yes, she's more than capable to do the job, but to have someone come out of one of our HBCUs, to be a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and for the black Greeks, okay, to be involved in a process beyond simply voter registration.
Yes.
So each of our groups, let's just say 100,000 members.
The Divine Nine.
In the Divine Nine. Let's just say as a base number, but there are probably more. We came out because we were supporting our sister. So for me to have her there, that showed our inclusion as members of Black Greek life and how we can make a difference.
Thank you, Mark. And speaking of future episodes, I want to have one on the HBCUs because I think we have often, those of us who are graduates of HBCUs, have often been looked at as some type of secondary under. Joe Biden is not even an Ivy League graduate. I'm glad about it, right? But this is an example of our schools have always been capable of producing leadership at that level, but haven't been given the opportunity. And this goes back to the disparities in our. Yeah, Doc.
No, I was just going to quickly say, and I'm just going to add that the HBCUs are producing intelligent African American women, but they're also producing intelligent African American men. And all I'm going to say with that is African American men are strong enough to have a strong African American woman next to them as well. And I'm gonna leave it there.
All right. Now, wait a minute. I want to make sure I understand. See, there's nothing like an understanding. Now, should I leave that one alone or should I?
Leave it alone.
Oh, okay, because we are live. I didn't want to. Okay, all right. Because I wasn't sure what Doc was trying to say there. Okay, this is we're moving to our last segment, and this is one I think I'll let everybody weigh in on just briefly because I find it intriguing. This segment is on Generation X, Y, Z, and the vote. And let me just give you a prelude. As a pastor who just turned 64, I'm the first to admit that I have so much to learn about the dynamics of life if you're a member of these groups, as we call them, X or millennials, whatever you want to call them. Don't get too upset with me. It's just it's my age. It's my it's not that I haven't been paying attention or whatever. It's just that time, and the same will happen to them. Some generation is going to rise up and think that they're crazy or insensitive or they don't care. But that's not it. It's just something about the time, like when I refer to, she said, well, what was your day? You know, talk back in your day. What was your day? My day would have been the 70s, based on the music that I liked. Earth, Wind, and Fire, and all of the, and funk.
Amen.
And the funk sound. That's what I relate to. Marvin Gaye and the lyrics. What's going on? Mercy, mercy me. Those were the kind of social action lyrics that resonated with me. It wasn't about some of these terrible things that young people are going to. That being said, despite Trump's failed leadership during the coronavirus epidemic and racial injustice, nevertheless, there were some in the hip-hop community, I think somebody mentioned this earlier, who remained supportive of President Trump. By the way, just a little footnote, did anyone see the prayer that Paula White gave?
Yes.
I'd be in private, we'll talk about that, but it was weird. It was weird. Trump, despite his foibles in leadership, these people stood up for him, like Ice Cube, 50 Cent, and Kanye West. Now, Ice Cube admitted to only that he just started paying attention to politics in the past year. Not the past 4 years, in the past year. And he decided to work within the Trump administration, basically agreeing to act as an independent advisor on behalf of black people. It's almost, well, okay. Secondly, Ice Cube, within his contract with Black America. Now, my first question, who did you contract with? A contract requires two parties. Who are the parties in it? Within his contract with America, he drew it up without first consulting with many of the black activists, and these were the ones who were in the street, getting beat up, getting sprayed with this, shot with rubber bullets, who have crafted similar plans in the process of implementing them with elected officials. Just start here and just give me just a little snippet of your thoughts on that. I know you probably could go on, but time won't allow. But Jackson, go ahead.
I just think of the Ice Cube matter, something like go back into the early 20th century or something, where there was some black token, and they were designated by white folks to be our voice and our representative. And it's a shame that we can come back to this era and think that someone can play that kind of role who really have not been engaged in the issues of confronting black folks in this country. And so hopefully Ice Cube and others would have learned their lesson, that there are too many black people that are hurting, they are dying, they're suffering, and it does not happen in one election. It's happening every single day. And so I hope that the brother, if he truly want to look out for his culture, that it doesn't just take an election. He got to be visible and involved and engaged.
That was so polite. That was so. I'm sitting over here boiling. I'm sitting here. You already see steam go outside of my ears. And that was just so eloquent. Thank you.
Pastor, he doesn't speak for us.
Okay.
And not you. I'm talking about the Ice Cubes and the Shaqs and the Lil Waynes. They don't speak for us. They can't communicate or relate to us, the working class. Right. They multimillionaires and they still receiving contracts elsewhere. They don't live in the community where we have, health issues, housing issues, educational issues, et cetera. They live in the exquisite areas of the country with gated communities. So they do not communicate for the real black community or the real Hispanic community. So therefore, when I hear what they're saying, I hear it, it goes in one ear and out the other.
But Mike, Deacon Mike, real quick, why do we turn to entertainers so often for issues that are so detached from the kind of lifestyles
Because
that they have?
that's the community we in now. We in a media structured community. It's not word of mouth anymore. Everything is on YouTube or exactly how many likes you're going to get on your face page and whatever the case may be. We're in a different community. So therefore, those images of those people are what the younger people and those folks who are engaged in that.
Well, let me rephrase that. Why do entertainers think that they have a role in articulating the plight of
Because they
black
already
people.
have a following. They already have a
So
following.
that you haven't told me anything
Right.
that warms my heart
It takes
about
the morality of the individual to know what their rules and their regulations and their morals are. We can follow anyone, but if they start jumping off the bridge, Pastor, we're not following them.
All right, let me I don't want to lose my order. We'll get to you, Mark. We'll get to you. Go ahead. It's your
I think there's a lesson to be learned by Judas and her getting them silver, piece of silver. They've lost touch with where they came from, period, right? They profited and came up off the backs of people who still continue to suffer every day. That's right. The black community is how they came up. They've gotten rich and they've gotten wealthy and they've forgotten the misery, the despair that is still happening in the communities that they came from. And so I've heard them say something, oh, Trump's going to take care of the taxes so I don't have to pay a couple of more dollars. What are you talking about?
Well, what about fight the power? Fight the power. I mean, all those were the lyrics of what they were saying, right?
They totally forgot it when they
With
got
the
money.
death row, I mean, they were activists for their own community as far as police and.
But that was 20 years ago.
They-
That was 30 years ago. Now they became actors.
20 years or $20 million.
Exactly.
And Pastor Johnson, we're focusing so much on the rappers like Ice Cube and Lil Wayne that, the black demographics is not a monolith. So there are some rappers who are basically saying one thing, but I want to shine the light on some rappers who are saying some great things, like T.I. and Snoop Dogg, who said this was his first time voting, and LeBron James galvanizing these young voters and joining the campaign, get out your vote. So although you have some people focusing on the Ice Cube, the Lil Wayne, and all of those, you do have some rappers who are doing great things. So shout out to the T.I.s and the Snoop Doggs and
So
the
Common.
LeBron and Common, who are actually trying to get the word out.
So what is your advice to people like me who, are pretty cynical about Lil Wayne and those even being allowed to have a microphone to talk about the election other than his citizen rights? What would be your advice to older school people? And we got to wind it up. My producer is telling me. Oh, okay. We got another clip? All right, think about that.
I'm willing to work with both teams, but I'm just working with whoever is willing to work with me. So the Trump campaign came to me and asked me to explain to them some of the contract with Black America. That's what I did. I'm not playing no more of these games, these political games. We're not part of a team. We have very broad problems, especially the wealth gap in this country when it comes to Black Americans. So I'm going to whoever's in power and I'm gonna speak to them about our problems specifically. I'm not going there talking about minorities. I'm not going there talking about people of color or diversity or none of that stuff. I'm going there for Black Americans, the ones who are the descendants of slaves. And that's what I'm going to talk to anybody who's in power with that. So if anybody got a problem with that, it seems like a personal problem.
I want to just say I agree and disagree with some of the things that he said. What I do like that Ice Cube did was he was willing to talk to both parties. Because a lot of times we sometimes get stuck in our ways and we don't want to see or listen to what the other side has to say. So I do like the fact that he was willing to talk to both parties. However, what the part that I disagree with was that you're willing to compromise any of your values to push your agenda across, which to me can seem a little selfish. And although you might not agree with this a president at the time, but you're willing to, because you want the Black America, your issue and your idea to be brought forth, you're willing to compromise to get your idea out there. So I don't agree with that instance on compromising his belief to get his idea out there, but I do like the fact that he was willing to talk to both parties.
No, I'm not about to burst. No, I just wanted to, what I wanted to say is that the Black community has always had activists within the entertainment community. it goes beyond, I'm sure it's older than Billie Holiday, but
Give me some example. Give me 2 or 3
I'm
examples.
gonna give you some. Billie Holiday with her song, Strange Fruit, spoke to lynching in the South. You already mentioned Marvin Gaye, What's Going On. If you remember, actor Harry Belafonte, Ozzie Davis, Ruby Dee, they all lent their celebrity to our cause because it meant something. Because now, when you talk about, let's take this forward, when you talk about, rappers and you made money off the black community, the reality is most rappers make their money off the white community. They've made a lot of money off the white community, so they have that ear. So going back to our first conversation, which you two weren't privy to, when you have someone like an Ice Cube and we're not engaged fully as a community to enlist them to help us, he said, I'll talk to anyone. The reason why he said that is because in his mind, he doesn't have the ear of the black leadership. So when you see these rappers getting on stage and saying these things, even though some of it may be against us, that should be a call to Democratic leaders like, hey, those are allies who we've lost. If they think that they can just go, I'm just gonna talk to whoever's in charge. And right now, Trump was in charge, so, Ice Cube, and to be fair, the only person I'm a little upset with is Ice Cube, because he does come from that. When you look at his old work as a rapper, it's amazing that this is where we are now.
Okay, but for this moment, Mark, for this moment, this is the leadership, right, in this group. Should we think it robbery to invite Ice Cube to come here and let us express?
Absolutely not. We think we should invite him here, yes. We should invite him here. He needs to have a platform so we can, what is it that he's talking about? He needs to come out to the communities that he's trying to protect to see exactly what it is that we need.
Okay.
Because he has a voice.
Madam,
let us use him.
Our producer, Kim, did you get that? We need to get a letter off to Ice Cube because if you don't, you ask not, you have not, because
That's
yes.
emphatic.
Let me come across, Sandra, I'm gonna go to Dr. Harris, because now I'll work my way back to you. I just want you to respond to what we're talking about, the entertainment community, and especially Kanye, I think, not Kanye, well, Kanye, Ice Cube, connecting with President Trump or with the Republican Party to have conversation about the needs of the black community at election time.
I think that Mark said something that I thought about, I guess, earlier, that entertainers and actors have always been a part of the civil rights movement. Mahalia Jackson, Harry Belafonte, and many of them. Now, when we talk about Ice Cube and these other entertainers who want to be leaders in the black community, I want to perhaps suggest that what happened to the black church and its dominant leadership in this here, somehow or another, they may be emerging because we're not doing what we should be doing.
Good point. I think we, not to cut you off, but we alluded to that in our first session, that the black church seems to have abdicated that responsibility to whoever comes on is willing to pick it up. I mean, not particular who picks it up. But, I think that is a loss. Not only is that unfortunate it happened, but it is a loss that to the church and another source of energy for the movement, anything that's based on the teachings of Jesus, peace, prosperity, safety, food, shelter. It's all within the context of Jesus' mission. But we did see, I think to a large extent, on last Tuesday, that there was the population galvanized in such a way that they really weren't as dependent upon the ministers hammering down, get out the vote, every Sunday leading up to the election. So I think that's something we got. Do we want that back? Do we feel like we're done something wrong?
I feel like we're losing our spiritual power in terms to change things.
Okay.
In terms of the fact is that we thank God that we got a new president, but somehow or another behind that, there have been a whole lot of folks who pray, who love Jesus and understand that we must call upon him even in the elections. And I think that we are getting away from what we need to do as Christians to make sure that we are not only viable, but we take the lead because we have the power to do so.
Okay. And if we can ever get clergy to come together and sit down and lay aside our differences long enough to revisit that topic, I think that'd be helpful. Yeah, you shared with us.
Harlem Churches for Community Improvement.
Yeah. But how long ago did you say that?
That was in 1987, 88.
Yeah.
And at that time, David Jenkins was the Manhattan Borough President.
Right. So it can happen.
They challenged each other, and they raised $200 million.
Okay. Well, so it is.
I think Pastor got the power. I think our pastor got the power.
I got the power.
You got the power. No, really.
Don't fight the power.
Don't fight it, but you got the power.
I'm gonna work with you, Pastor.
Yeah, I am. I'm completely out of time. However, there's one more bite I want. Do we have time for that last bite? Can we?
The people of this nation have spoken. They've delivered us a clear victory, a convincing victory, a victory for we the people. We've won with the most votes ever cast on a presidential ticket in the history of the nation. 74 million. What I must admit has surprised me. Tonight, we're seeing all over this nation, all cities and all parts of the country, indeed across the world, an outpouring of joy, of hope, renewed faith in tomorrow, bring a better day. And I'm humbled by the trust and confidence you've placed in me. I pledge to be a president who seeks not to divide, but unify, who doesn't see red states and blue states, only sees the United States.
Okay, so there you have it. That's the victory speech from President-elect Biden. The simple question is, what's next? Elections over for all intents and purposes. What is next? Let me go to Katrina and some folks I haven't had a chance to talk too much. Katrina?
I think it's going to be a combination of everything that everybody has said on this panel. I mean, between, activism, getting out there, not only just holding these representatives accountable, but telling them what we want, getting out there and making that example. You also have to be proactive. You just can't wait for someone to do something for you. Yes, we're gonna hold them accountable, but you gotta be proactive. You gotta educate yourself. The generations need to speak, our older folks, our younger folks. Those conversations need to happen. So what's next? We got a lot of work to do, but we must be proactive in what we're doing.
Thanks. Johnny?
I think, everything my sister Katrina just said, but just to add to that, I would say that a good place to start is how you fill out your cabinet. You need to put people in decision-making positions so that can start to materialize. I mean, just to say that, he owes us a great deal. I mean, he needs to put us in positions to make policy changes that are gonna reflect what we want.
Yeah, don't you also want that person to have the skill set to do for example, I think of Carson over in HUD. I can't think of a single contribution, but he's an African American, so, Go ahead. Doc, since you're at home, I'm going to save you for the next. Real quick, Sandra, what next?
What next is, I think that we all have, what next, what's really next
Yeah.
is Georgia and winning those 2 Senate
Oh, so
seats.
we need the Senate.
That's what's next.
Amen.
And this is a great time for us to show the young people how important it is when all of the government has to work together. We understand the importance of a president, but if we have a divided Senate and we see what's happening with Mitch McConnell, we need to win the Senate back.
All right,
That's
Brett
the
Jackson.
first thing that we need to do.
All right, thank you. I didn't mean, I'm just trying to meet
I'm
my.
sorry.
Brett Jackson, any, what next? Yes.
Jackson. I know Jesse was
Bro Allen, my bad, go ahead.
I said 64, is that?
As I said in the last segment, that we really got to, what's next is that we have to continue to be organized, to hold each other accountable, that voting is not enough, is to be totally politically educated, not only in terms of what happens nationally, but what happens in our own community, like here in New York City. I mean, what's happening in Harlem. I mean, as blacks get pushed out of this community, we actually get pushed out of Manhattan. And so there's a whole lot of other issues we're going to have to address, but we'll be able to effectively address those things if we claim our power and manage our power.
Yeah, fantastic. I want to come back to you on that sometimes, because sometimes I feel that we're getting pushed out of this community, but nobody seems to.
Actually, we gave our keys away.
Yeah. Okay. Shauna, and then my friend, and I'm going to ask all the Canaan people to just let me skip over you this time because we're out of time.
So I think a lot of people have said it best. Working together is what's next, and because we just need support. Senator Vice President Kamala Harris and President-elect Joe Biden, they're going to need support. They're going to need help. So what's next is just working together and putting all of our political differences aside and just working together. And also, so many people are focused on voting in the general election. Like William Allen said, we need to look locally. Let's vote in the primary election, because a lot of times not a lot of people vote in the primary election. Half the time, they don't even know when their primary election is. So we need to make sure that we encourage people not only to vote in the general election, but vote in the primary election. And then we, as the candidates and the people who work for the candidates, we need to make sure that the community knows who those candidates are, so that way they can vote effectively and make sure that there are changes that they want for the community to be made. When they vote for the person, it will be accurate. So we just need to make sure we encourage people to vote in primaries as well as the general.
Mr. President, we'll close out with you.
Well, thank you. I think that we have to roll up our sleeves and continue to get to work. Obviously, I agree with my sisters. All that they said has actually proven how much smarter black women are than black men. But we have to winning in Georgia is important, but we cannot tie our victories to winning in Georgia. What we have to do is roll up our sleeves and make each side of the aisle respect our voice, our opinions, our experience, our conditions. And so we have to make them feel that they're vulnerable if they're not answerable to the people of this country, the people who are under the most trying and difficult conditions. And we know what our experience is, and we have to make sure that we put that pressure on both sides of the aisle to be responsive to our communities. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Let me say thank you to all of our panelists today. This was an extremely engaging conversation, even more so than a couple of weeks ago. I think if we could get Nielsen to take a look at the footage of this, we might get a rating. But again, I just want you to know on behalf of Canaan Baptist Church, this pastor, we appreciate you taking your time out to come over, have this conversation. And I hope that we can follow up on some of these really powerful suggestions that have been made since we've been here over the last hour. Thanks to our production team for all that you have done and efforts that you've put forward, to our audio people as well, and everything just seems to have gone extremely well. Thanks for tuning in to Crosstalk. We'll be coming back within the next week or so with another edition. and we hope that you'll take time to tune in. Please be consistently looking at our website, our Facebook site, which is Canaan Baptist COC, and our YouTube trending is found through Canaan Baptist COC.org. I think I've got that right. At any rate, you can always find out what's going on over Canaan, and it's a lot going on. We want you to know about it. So thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to sharing with you next time. Good night.